to your next mayor. We're here today with Anabailao, who is our mayoral candidate. And I'm super excited to talk with her because I've wanted to speak with her for a long time. Even before this, she's been doing so much work in Toronto, affordable housing, which is something I'm passionate about. So let's turn this over to Anna.
Hello.
Anna, thank you so much for joining me. You're on Tea with Lee, but my question is tea or coffee?
Depends on the time of the day. So morning, definitely coffee. But after lunch, I love my tea. Chamomile tea, especially.
Chamomile tea, that's awesome. Well, I'm so excited for you to be here today because honestly, you have been a champion for Toronto. You've done so much, I know, in affordable housing. And so even before this all happened, I was like, I really want to talk to Anna about all of those things. But, let's start with like the thing that everyone's interested in. Anna for mayor.
Anna for mayor.
Tell me about it.
Well, I love this city. As you said, I've championed this city because I feel like it's given me so much. I came when I was 15. And I sense the opportunity, the safety, the welcoming to the city. And today, I don't feel the services are working for us. And I want to fix services. I want to make life easier and more affordable to people. And I bring to the table the experience, life experience, obviously, as an immigrant woman from a working class, but also the work experience of 12 years at council, 3 terms, 5 of those years as deputy mayor, and a lot of work on the file that continues to need much attention, which is housing as well. But a focus now to fix services and make life easier and more affordable.
I mean, that's the very thing. Right now, the biggest pieces that people are talking about is affordable housing, right? How to address that? It is public service. It's transportation. It is all these things about public safety. And it just seems as though with all the experience that you've had since being a counselor in 2010, and even the work that you did before that, really prepares you for what needs to be done.
Yeah. I believe that. And I believe in, good services and the city delivering good services. I think we all feel like the pandemic really turned our lives around as people. We feel that, but it also turned, the city around and the way that we're delivering services. I think, especially some services that were already, feeling the cracks and under a lot of pressure, we're having a hard time coming back. I don't feel like we're coming back the way that we could and the way that we should. Perfect example is the TTC. We know that ridership crashed during, people were working from home and it crashed during the pandemic. And it's not coming back. And cuts, not having a safe TTC, it's not going to bring people back. So we need a real focus on fixing services like the TTC. They're core to our city. A good public transit is core to the mobility of the city. And so fixing those services, making sure that people are not waiting half an hour for a bus. And when it comes, you have to wait for 2 or 3 because you can't get on the first one. Making sure people feel safe and therefore having a really coordinated approach that brings more staff, from TTC staff, from, cleaners, make sure that the stations are clean, make sure that there's supervisors, make sure that you have the mental health workers and the housing support workers to deal with some of the issues that we're seeing as well on the TTC. Making sure we have cell service. I've talked from day one that I started, I've talked about this because, it's a symptom, I think, of something that should have been done a long time ago that has a huge impact on safety. I mean, I hear from so many people that said, you have a text line that I can't use until I get above ground. Like, how good is this? And the crisis that we're seeing right now, we have to have all tools. And that's one of the tools that we should be, doing right now. And that's why I've put the Bell and Telus and Rogers on call to say, you know what? You're not going to get the $30 million in contracts that you get from the City of Toronto on cell support if you're not providing reliable service on the TTC. Because we need all these actions, the cell, the staff, bring back the services. All this is, what needs to happen, together with the real big questions of how we're delivering mental health services in this province and the city, how we're delivering housing, how we're doing bail reform to not have, the issues that we've been seeing lately. So all these things need to happen, and you need somebody that can get into City Hall very quickly, that can work with counselors, that can work with the other orders of government to get it done. And so TTC is definitely one of the services that we've been talking about. Another service that I've been talking about, it was the neighborhood program for healthy seniors.
Yeah.
We had an excellent program that got highest vaccination rates around the world. We did really well. Yeah. We had 600 ambassadors that spoke over 50 languages, going into every neighborhood, door to door, with our nonprofits, really getting people to get their vaccines. We have the infrastructure. So let's be smart about these things. Let's use some common sense. And I think that's what this program is all about. Taking advantage of the 600 ambassadors, getting them to deliver healthcare and wellness checks door to door, and promote the mobile clinics that we would be doing. So step 2, get mobile clinics into these communities. And the communities that we're talking about is 500 buildings that have 70,000 seniors, 30,000 of them over the age of 80 in these buildings, that we could be reaching out through the ambassadors, getting the mobile clinics, and provide pre-screenings, post-op checks, medication checks. And if we see that they need further referrals, refer them, through our healthcare partners.
It just makes sense. It's efficient. It's building on something that we always have. You don't have to recreate the wheel. It's proven. And now you just kind of build it up. I mean, when I was reading about this and all the work, seniors are very near and dear to me. It's something that's really important. And we know that so many seniors are living it singularly, individually. And we see in the recent newspapers that there are people who are like, look, I'm on OAS. I can actually live in a main floor level. I have to be relegated to a basement apartment, and it's something that's so concerning, because we also know, I live out in East York, there are homes where a single person is living in it, but there's like 2 or 3 bedrooms that are free. They're actually not even living upstairs because they have mobility issues. How can we maximize space and utilize it so that, yes, we totally need to build up. We need to do the density fill and everything like that. But how can we actually use what we have? And so one of the things I remember when I was living in Denmark was this wonderful program where you would have seniors who lived there, but you had a young person who got like less rent or something. And their goal was to talk to people. Like, I kept thinking, we need to do something in this Toronto. And then you just told me something awesome.
Yeah, we did. We did a pilot program that was very successful. And now we have a nonprofit organization that is actually doing that kind of work. So they place youth at a more affordable rent in a senior's home. And then the youth has to provide a certain amount of hours that they help the senior with their groceries or shoveling snow, cutting the grass, doing whatever the senior is. And it has huge benefits. The housing, very important, but also the social connection that it happens, right? You probably have a senior that is leaving on their own, isolated. So the comfort of not only getting the physical help, but having somebody there with them. So it's such a win-win situation. Yeah. But it's, and now we're starting to go into the housing stuff. Yeah, it's also about creating housing options for the people of Toronto, right? It's being creative with what we need to do. Things like this program is essential. Laneway housing, coach housing, multiplexes, all that needs to be part of our housing solution here in Toronto as well.
I think one thing that's really great is you are a champion of affordable housing. You are a champion of how do we, laneway housing, all of these things that you have just mentioned are things you actually did when you were a counselor. And I think, what I would really like is for people who are watching, like, who's going to be our next mayor? Why is it important? And what are the skills that you bring to the table? Certainly, this is something which you are well aware of and have done things for.
Yeah. I really think that housing, affordable housing, housing affordability, the whole continuum of housing goes to the core soul of our city.
Yeah.
The social health and the economic health of our city depends on a good and healthy housing system.
Yeah.
If people are being pushed out, our workers are being pushed out of the city. If people spend 70 or 80% of their income in rents and, can't afford proper food, can't afford, programs to have a healthy lifestyle, if we just have a city where there's no middle class, people feel like they can't buy a home where they grew up, or they can't age where they spent all their life, and they have all their social supports and their doctors and the community centers, that will change the city.
Yeah.
That will change the soul of the city. And that's why from day one, I also felt that when I was elected, I started working on this issue because I think it's so important. And believe me, it wasn't a popular issue. 12 years ago, you couldn't get a headline on housing issues. But it is really an issue that I think it's crucial, and people feel it today. People are talking about housing affordability, and how can the city make life more affordable for people is to make sure that we play our role. There's not one order of government that can solve it on its own. I think it's very important that we say this. And that's why it is important to have a mayor that can work with the other orders of government, in particular on this issue. Housing needs all three orders of government. It needs the nonprofit sector. It needs builders. It needs the communities involved in this issue. Because we've been talking a lot about the supply. Absolutely. We in the city of Toronto have a role because we have all the approvals. So how can we make sure that we have a more lean process, that we have a more efficient process to approve the units, the thousands of units that we need to build in the city? Essential. We also own a lot of land in the city. Look at the Portlands. Majority of that land is owned by the city. We can use that to bring affordability into this issue. So the use of land, how we speed the approvals, how you create some areas where you have it as of right, so people don't have, the main streets that people, if you want to build the mid-rise, the 6-8 stories buildings, that they don't have to go through a lengthy process, and you speed that up. All those are things that the city can do and that can impact the supply of housing. But it's also very important to recognize that we have a key role as a government to make sure that the deeper affordability, the supportive housing, the deeper affordability is done. And the market alone is never going to produce that. And so it's very important that governments recognize that and don't try just to solve the issue by saying we're going to bring more supply. Supportive housing, I've done a wonderful project in my community. We've done with modular housing, so new technology. We built 44 apartments in 6 months. It was approved at council in June, and by January, I was welcoming people into that building. And that was done with city land, operating money for the supports from the province, and capital money from the federal government, and being operated by a nonprofit organization. So you need all hands on deck. You need to understand these systems to bring from, everything from the supportive housing all the way to the supply issues. And we need to keep what we have, because it's not only about building new, but how do you retain what we have? And, when I started working on housing, the city was selling social housing units.
Wasn't it like 675 units?
It was
or something?
almost 800 units that they were selling. And to me, that made no sense. I was like, okay, so you're just going to keep selling to repair that doesn't make any sense. That at the time, we stopped the sale, and it's saved. We actually created land trusts. Now they're in the hands of land trusts.
We have to stop for a second. The way you stopped the sale was actually mobilizing community members to put forth a study and research that was based on, research.
Yeah, it was research and the impact that it had on the communities. And we put a campaign to ensure that the federal and provincial government were going to come to the table and help us with the backlog. It was a $2.6 billion backlog that we had. And at the time, everybody was like, oh my God, this is no plan because you're asking the other orders of government for money. No
Right.
plan. We should just keep selling, keep selling. Well, we didn't sell. Those are now in the hands of amazing land trusts that are providing good service. And we have a fully funded $2.6 billion plan for Toronto community housing, fully capital funded. And when I talk about a fair deal for Toronto, for example, that we need, this is the kind of leadership that you need at the city to get that fair deal. We're not going to take no for an answer. Toronto's not going to take no for an answer. Yeah. We need these services. Torontonians need these services. And if there's one thing that the pandemic has shown us is how governments can work together and should work together to address these big challenges. And mental health and housing and the future of the economic engine of this country and this city is a big issue, a big challenge that we need to come together. And this new deal needs to start with the provincial government recognizing the Gardner and the DVP and paying for them. These were their highways until the 90s. Unlike other cities around us, we pay for a full maintenance and rebuild, even though about 50% of the people that use them don't live in the city.
I mean, this comes back to previous governments thinking, should we introduce tolls? All of
and
these conversations.
We tried as a city, council put forward and said, okay, we're going to do tolls. Actually, the premier, Doug Ford, when he was a councillor back in 2012, he floated that idea. He put it out there saying that we should toll at least one lane of the Gardner for people from outside Toronto. Because he knew that it's not fair. Other cities don't pay for this. The pressures that we have in the budget, and that it makes sense that we share these costs with who are using it. It's not fair that the Torontonians who are getting their services cut, who are not getting the services that they deserve, are the only ones paying for it. So I say that we need a fair deal. We need that experience to bring these facts and solutions. And at the end of the day, I see it very much as a solution, because look at what's been happening in the last few years. The province and the feds have been coming with a check, right, at the end of the year. Well, the check to fill that budget deficit that we have, almost half of it is produced by the low ridership in the TTC. Yeah. And what I'm saying is, let's invest the money in making sure that we have a safe, reliable, and convenient TTC. So we bring up the ridership, we give better services to the people, and we deal with that budget issue. So let's be proactive, have more permanent solutions, and have a fair deal for the city.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, honestly, we've actually talked about a bunch of things that I was already thinking about, in the sense of, what I wanted to ask you is why you, Anna, why you as mayor? And you've really demonstrated the experience that you bring, having been a councillor, being able to work with multiple levels of government, challenging the status quo by saying, okay, if nobody's ever talked about affordable housing, here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to bring studies, research, and empirical facts so that we can actually make an informed decision, which demonstrates there's thought behind this and there's substance behind it. It's not, I just feel like doing this. It makes sense, right? And a proven pathway. And, housing affordability on so many levels is important. So I guess we've covered a lot of things because we've jumped around.
Can I just add one thing, Lee? I think that, people, I feel the frustration of people. And I feel that people want pragmatism, common sense, and the governments to work to deliver these solutions for them, to work together. And I bring that pragmatism. That I've dealt with the housing file. I've dealt with these issues always in a very pragmatic. I don't take no for an answer, so that helps, I think. And about delivering results. What is the most efficient? Where can we get the best results? There is one thing that I agree with the premier, is that there's only one taxpayer.
Yeah.
Right? And people are, struggling out there. Affordability is an issue.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that services are fixed and that we make life easier and more affordable for people. And that we get a fair deal for Toronto.
And we get a fair deal for Toronto. I got it here. Fair deal for Toronto. So in terms of, Toronto, here's a question I want to ask. What's good about Toronto? The good, the bad, the ugly, right? So what's good, what's bad, and what's the ugly? We kind of talked about some of these things, but, what makes Toronto awesome?
I think it's diversity. I think the people of Toronto is what makes Toronto. And that's why I think governments need to work so hard to continue to create the opportunity for people to succeed, to have an easier life and a more affordable life, because people come from all around the world here for that.
Yeah.
We need them to continue to come. We want them to continue to come. And they bring different experiences, and that's what makes Toronto wonderful. We attract investment based on the people, on the experience. If you succeed here, you succeed anywhere in the world as a company. Yeah. We need to make sure that our people, everyone in the city, has an opportunity to succeed, that we're there with the social supports and the opportunities to support entrepreneurship, small businesses. I love going out there and experience all kinds of different small business and foods and cultures and ideas that people bring and different perspectives. I think that is fantastic. That is what Toronto has the best.
I totally agree with you. I mean, Toronto is known for its diversity and people travel here from all over. And I think what makes Toronto super unique is you can walk through communities, see Little Portugal, Little India, Little Greek, like Greek town, right? Little Chinatown. But we also see with the rising costs of housing that there's flight. People are like newcomers can't necessarily afford to live in a lot of these places because rent is so high, or we have a lot of people cramming into small spaces. And so this speaks to the housing piece that you were talking about, modular housing. I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about that?
I would, when you said what's bad, I think this is the challenge that we're facing right now in terms of how to grow our city with that equity lens, with making sure that people can still stay here, our workers can still live here.
That's so important.
Extremely, extremely important. I've talked with many companies, hospitals, our own staff. Everybody's having a hard time attracting employees. Everybody in the region, in the country, yes. We need workers in this country. But when you have, the more expensive of a city you have, the more difficult it is, right? So you really need to make sure that you have a city that is delivering good services, core services, TTC. How do you move people around? How do you have an efficient mobility plan? And core of that is TTC. How do you make sure that people can get to work on time, that they don't lose hours of work to get to work? How do you make sure that people feel safe in the TTC? How do you make sure that people can afford to live here? How do you make sure that, you have lean processes to build that house, to create that housing that the people that are coming can still stay here and use all the mechanisms to create that affordability as well. So,
okay, so then the ugly.
I think the ugly is this. It's the challenges that we're facing right now. I think we really need to have that common vision that I talk to everybody, and everybody's like, the good thing about Toronto is how people from all different backgrounds, economic, and live together. And I think that we're at risk of losing that if we don't take really quick action right now. And that's why we need a mayor that really understands these issues, really understands City Hall, doesn't take no for an answer, and works with the other orders of government and has a plan. And you've heard me talk about the plan here. We need to invest in these services. We need to build the housing. And bring the experience and the leadership to get it done.
I totally hear you. I totally hear you, and I agree with you in that sense because diversity is our strength. How do we maintain and support that? Services, transportation, public safety, of course, is something that is a growing concern. And I think the idea of like, well, being able to have like cell service is something that's really important because communicating, letting people know that something's wrong, because there's nothing worse than feeling like, I can't, wait a minute, my phone's not working. Everybody's glued to their phones in so many ways.
And because what we really need is a public safety plan in the city, right?
Yeah.
And policing is part of it. And I do believe that we need to have a well-funded and well-trained police to, deal with hate crimes and car thefts and homicides and all this stuff that you need the police to be trained and to do the investigations and to do that work. But we need, for example, the crisis unit that we've just started with the pilots in the city of Toronto to respond to mental health crisis. We need to expand that to the whole city. We need to make sure that there's investments in the supports, in the mental health, so that when you make the call and you need the mental health services, there is a way for you to get that mental health assistance. So it is critically important. All this is part of a public safety. That's how you bring public safety to the city, right? What we talked about, the creation of the supportive housing, that is part of the public safety as well. It is really important that people have a home and have those supports around them to make sure that they're safe and that the community is as a whole is safe. That's how you create public safety as well.
For sure. I mean, look, you bring well over decades of years of experience here. And I think that from 2010, when you were a counselor, till now, 2023, what's the change that you have seen? Like, I feel COVID has really shifted things. And so what you bring is, what was life like before COVID? And now recognizing, mental health is something that's really important. That shifted a lot. And policing isn't the first answer to everything. It's important, but we also need to provide wraparound services. So I guess my question to you is, what has changed between 2010 and now?
So I agree with everything that you said in terms of the mental health. Absolutely. Let me go back to the area that I've been doing a lot of work on, the housing stuff. What has changed? So in 2012, you had still governments stepping away from housing. Okay. Nobody, and we had decades of that. And in 2012, it was still like that. At City Hall, I kept hearing, housing is not our business. Housing is not our business. Well, in 12 years, what has happened is the situation has now been in the minds of everybody, because everybody from, a worker that can't afford to buy or rent in the city of Toronto anymore, to the supportive housing or social housing wait lists that keep growing. At the same time, you have, as the city of Toronto, back into the housing business, has never invested as much as we are doing right now. But because we had decades of government stepping away from the housing business, you are on a constant, catch up.
It's so interesting about even the fact that you mentioned that the government stepped away from it, because when we even think about rental stock, like purpose-built rentals, there's a few popping up now, but oftentimes when I take my clients out who are looking for rentals, looking at properties, purpose-built rentals are often from the 70s and 80s. Yeah. And they're like, that's the purpose-built rental.
Yeah.
And
we need to keep those. It's some of the most affordable stock in the city.
It is.
But we need to have a real focus. It is something that I've worked on when I was in council, and I will as mayor, to have a real focus in increasing the construction of purpose-built rental. We have to make it easier. We need to make sure that we attract the investment to the purpose-built rental. It is very important. But it is important to recognize that today in the city of Toronto, you stop selling social housing, you're fixing it, you're repairing it, You're assisting nonprofit organizations buying and preserving social housing through a program that we have now to assist them. You are using land to create affordable housing. You've built thousands of units of supportive housing. You have almost 20,000 units of affordable housing in the pipeline. So there has been a movement in this area, and a lot more needs to be done. And that's why you really need to have somebody that can deliver on this, that understands, that has the relationships with the other governments. We need to continue to have the provincial government at the table. Supportive housing is crucial. All these issues that we're seeing, we need to increase the stock of supportive housing. It needs to come with the supports. And again, let me bring you a little bit of my pragmatism.
Okay, I love it.
It actually makes economic sense, Lee. You know that right now, because of the pandemic, it costs $6,000 a month to have somebody in our shelter. Used to be $4,000 before the pandemic. It costs about $2,000 to have somebody in a supportive housing with their own apartment, with a key, with the supports, with the dignity of having a home. So it's the most humane thing to do. It's the most economical thing to do. So that's the kind of pragmatism that I think people want, is like, get on with this, right? Let's work together. Let's all these projects that we've done that we know it works. We need to scale it up and speed it up.
And even to that point about the shelters, the cost of what it costs to shelter one person. We know in Scandinavian countries that they've worked on this to provide shelter for folks, right? Whether it's in Finland or in Sweden. And I think that there's proven measures that have worked, and it'll, when you have someone housed in a secure wraparound solutions with dignity, which was a key thing that you also said, it also relieves the use of hospitals, going into the emergency room.
Let me give you another.
Okay,
I love these things, because these are the arguments that we need to use, and that makes sense. And that's why I like to work on these programs, because it like I said, it's the humane thing to do, but it's also the economic thing to do. UHN is doing a partnership with the City of Toronto, and I never forget the day we broke ground, the CEO of UHN saying that they had in 1 year collected some data, and 250 homeless people did 15,000 visits to the ER. That's about a visit a week. And if they have to stay there, that's about $1,000 a night, right? So again, how can we have smart solutions towards these things? And this is the same pragmatism that I bring through the neighborhood program for healthy seniors, through the TTC. Let's have all hands on deck. Let's make sure that, not only you have more staff to have eyes, more cleaner stations, more help, mental health workers, the Wi-Fi, the service, bring back the services so people have reliable service and they know they can get on time to make their lives easier, and that they don't have to lose work hours. This is the pragmatism that we need. And the same pragmatism that I'm saying to the province, listen, we need a fair deal. You've been, coming with a check at the end of the year. Let's solve the issue. And part of the issue is attracting that ridership back. We need the money from the Gardner and the DVP, which nobody else in the region pays for their highways, which 50% don't use it. Let's bring that money to the services, fix the services, so that we have a permanent solution. And we have good services in the economic engine of the city. We need our working people that work hard. This city gives so much, and it's giving even more now, because anybody that goes shopping, whatever cost them $100 yesterday cost them $150.
Yeah, totally.
Lee,
Inflation.
that's more HST that the federal and provincial government are getting.
And
we're not getting any of it. And our lives are getting harder, tougher, more expensive. And all we're saying is we need to make sure that we get a fair deal for Torontonians. We produce a lot of the money that the federal and provincial government are getting. We need to make sure that these services are available for the residents of Toronto.
It's totally fair. We need a deal. Like, we're the largest city, right? Like Toronto, Vancouver. And so I think that's really pragmatic. I think when you break down the numbers, it doesn't make sense. Like, it costs $1,000 for a homeless person to go into our hospital, and then all the ripple costs on every level of government. And it's like, it needs an overhaul, right? And as a mayor, I think what's so important about municipal politics and what people don't recognize with when we vote for councillor and when we're voting for mayor, everything that you just mentioned is something that touches someone every single day.
Absolutely.
The phone is something that touches them every moment. The moment you walk outside your door, you have to figure out how you're going to get somewhere. That's municipal touch point. Your gas, like your car, like your walking, like your garbage, all of that touches the person so immediately, right? And that layer of government, municipal governance, is so important for that very reason. Okay, I feel like we've covered so much stuff, and I really appreciate it. One thing I wanted to ask you, just sort of on a whole different note, is what's your favorite quote?
So I'm going to give you a quote or a value. It's something that is always with me. And the author
Yes.
is my grandmother, which was the most important woman of my life, the most important person. And she used to tell me all the time, never forget where you came from. And for me, it guides me, is something that I have always with me. I never forget, that I'm an immigrant woman, that I am from a working class family. And so creating, good jobs, having opportunities for people, making sure that, people can get on the TTC and feel safe, making sure that as we are developing, the city, that we create opportunities. I'm a big fan of something that is called, and I worked at the city, something that is called community benefit agreements, right?
Yes.
There's a lot happening in the city. How can we take it even further? How can we make sure that the communities, the people around there, they get the good jobs, they get an opportunity, the small business? How do we do it in an equitable way? Like, I think that's what moves me. And this quote is always in my mind. Never forget where you came from.
I love it. Never forget where you came from. And I see that in the work that you do, right? From your community in Davenport, how, people elected you over and over and over again with bigger and bigger majorities. And because you had a proven track record and that you said what you were going to do and you found a way to do it. So I'm really excited to see, never forget where you came from, right? Like, never forget who you are, because I think it reflects Toronto. Like, Toronto is a city built on immigrants. It is a city built on hardworking people. And that's what I love about Toronto. And I'm really keen to see that we elect, that people are engaged to vote, and that they say, look, this is important because my phone, my transportation, my home, all of that impacts me, and it matters who I vote for.
Yeah. And that people demand and deserve good services from the city of Toronto. And they deserve to continue to live in the city and to have life made easier for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna.